The Mets are so bad. Let me ask you right now, who's their manager? Who's the Mets manager? Do you know who the manager is? I
I
bet you
will if
don't.
you tell me.
I knew it.
Hello and welcome back to the LA Times' Dodger Debate. I'm Jack Harris from Citi Field in New York. Back in LA, we have our two sports columnists, Bill Plaschke and Dylan Hernandez. Guys, we're reconvening at sort of an interesting time for the Dodgers, who were really struggling, especially offensively, up until this week when they came to New York. They swept a doubleheader from the Mets yesterday. They completed a series sweep today with the kind of offensive outburst that had gone missing for this team the last few weeks, a 10-3 win. It's an interesting time of the year for the Dodgers. They're a first-place team. They're still on pace to make the playoffs pretty easily. That said, they were also just losers of 5 in a row. They were 7-19 in 16 games before this series. The lineup has looked probably a lot more inconsistent than a lot of people thought. So how do you feel about this team right now? Is this better than you were expecting? Are they playing worse than you would have thought? Is this some of the up and down you expect with a team that was kind of built as top heavily as the Dodgers were? Like, what is sticking out to you right now about how they're playing, where they're at, and sort of the trajectory of the year at the moment?
I'm worried. I got nightmares of the last two Octobers in recent weeks. The bottom of the order just not coming through. The top of the order seemed frozen at times. They seem disinterested at times. It's weird. I just think it's weird. I thought they'd be better. I thought they'd be more consistent than this. I think the Phillies are the best team in the National League. And I don't think the Dodgers can match up with them right now, and that surprises me. I just don't. Everything is slanted with the memories of the recent nightmares, and those memories came back to life for me the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the last time we did this, Jack, we kind of talked about the Muncy, Teoscar Hernandez slots there, and just kind of how much that can swing the lineup. We're talking about two kind of high strikeout guys who, when they're not hitting, right, and all of a sudden it's just, you're just looking at 1 through 4. When those guys are hitting, now you're looking at 1 through 6. Lineup feels a lot longer, a lot more dangerous. And yeah, just kind of not having Muncy there. I think kind of the surprising thing is just the impact, right? Just take out one kind of piece there. These players aren't quite as interchangeable maybe as we thought they might be. That said, I mean, this time of the year is this time of the year. And, right now the objective is still, right, you still have to take step one, which is get to the playoffs. And yeah, they weren't playing well, but, you play a team as bad as the Mets, right? And that's a really bad team. I mean, they should have lost 6 in a row. They should have lost that first one. The Mets just like handed them the victory. I mean, they are so bad. Isn't it like I mean, SNY must be having, and I don't know if anyone, in LA is familiar with SNY, but it's like the opposite of, Sportsnet, right? Sportsnet is, hey, go team. They got their pom-poms out, Jerry Hairston leaning on the bat, kind of almost embarrassing himself on a nightly basis. And SNY is the opposite. I mean, those guys are all throwing daggers at the team.
All right, Dylan, the Mets are so bad. Let me ask you right now, who's their manager? Who's the Mets manager? Do you know who the manager is? I bet you
will
don't.
if you tell me.
I knew it.
I just saw it on
it's supposed to
TV
be a playoff team. Dark
Just
horse
saying.
playoff contender.
I was watching the game the other day, and I thought to myself, I bet Dylan doesn't know who this manager is. And I was right. You don't.
I saw him on TV. Who is it?
Mendoza.
Carlos Mendoza.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten that one.
I know Ohtani went deep today. Is there concern about his hamstring? He's looked inconsistent too lately?
Yeah, not really. That one seems more like it's kind of a minor bump he picked up when he got hit on a pickoff throw last week in the back of the leg. He said it's not impacting his swing. Dodger coaches think that his mini slump the last couple weeks here is just kind of one of those lulls you go through during a season where the swing gets a little off. They still like his approach. They still think he's hitting the ball hard and a lot of at-bats. And you saw today, had the home run that helped them pull away. I think kind of getting back to what Bill was saying at the start of this, these couple of weeks really did feel exactly like what's plagued the Dodgers in the last couple of postseasons, right? Miguel Rojas said as much in the clubhouse today, which is the bottom of the lineup wasn't contributing. The guys at the top weren't doing enough to help pick up the slack. Yeah, you had a missing guy in Max Muncy, but look, Max Muncy a lot of times has been part of the problem in the playoffs because he strikes out too much. He was kind of struggling even before he got hurt. And, like it or not, like it looks like he's going to be out. They were hoping he was going to come back this week. It's looking now like it's going to be at least a couple more weeks as he continues to battle this oblique thing. And all of this to me is a sign that for all the talent the Dodgers have, again, at the top of the lineup, kind of like we've talked about since, the Korea series, they have consistently looked too top heavy. They have not gotten nearly enough reliable production at the bottom of the lineup. Right now, of the guys who are routinely batting 6 to 9, like Miguel Rojas is the only one who's been hitting on any sort of consistent basis this season. And the challenge here is this was a team that to be their best, they needed Gavin Lux to be productive. They needed Kike Hernandez and Jason Hayward to be pretty good platoon bats. They needed Miguel Rojas's glove more than his bat. They needed guys like Miguel Vargas when he came up or Andy Pajes to be productive. And right now they're not getting that. And I think the longer term issue here that you have to worry about if you're the Dodgers or a Dodger fan is there's going to be times over the course of the season where those top 3 or 4 guys in the lineup are either not playing well or maybe out with an injury or maybe just a little out of sync or the pitching isn't good enough. Like you're going to have to get production from the bottom of the lineup. And I don't know of the current group that they have where that's going to come from, who the guys are that are suddenly going to become guys that you feel good about taking 3 or 4 at bats on a nightly basis in October. And to me, the fact that they haven't been able to overcome some of that a little bit more, that when the bottom of the lineup is struggling and when they're not delivering in key situations, like it's not a surprise that when the guys at the bottom of the order are struggling, they're also not hitting with runners in scoring position, because guess who's getting most of the at-bats with runners in scoring position behind Ohtani and Freeman and Mookie and Will Smith? It's the rest of these guys. And over these first couple months, that's what struck me, is that bottom half is, I think, a lot more important than people were maybe thinking it was going to be coming into the year. And it's a lot more troublesome than I think a lot of people thought it was going to be coming into the year, which leads me to my next question to you guys, which is how do you fix this, right? Is this something that, we're 2 months out from the trade deadline about right now? Do you feel like this is a team that really needs to go out and find another bat, find another key contributor? Do you ride it out with this group you have and hope that, the Gavin Luxes and Kike Hernandezes and maybe even Chris Taylors of the world can find some sort of rhythm? Because to me, this is a group that, of all the ways the season can kind of go sideways on the Dodgers, especially in a postseason environment, that's where I have the most concern and the fewest sort of obvious answers about how they can fix it.
Well, last season they didn't do anything. They needed starting pitching. They didn't do anything, and they paid the price. I can't imagine Andrew Freeman will do nothing this year. I can't imagine he will take the risk. They're so all in on winning the championship. They'll do it. They'll do anything to get over the top. They won't leave anything to chance. So I think I'm confident they'll get a hitter or two somewhere. I don't know where they'll get them from. They have enough assets to get anybody they want, probably. And I'm confident they'll do that because they didn't do it last year and they paid the price.
I mean, who are the bats that would be like theoretically available in this market?
Well, I mean, this becomes part of the question, right?
Yeah,
because you look at the outfield, you're talking about like a Tommy Pham or maybe a Tyler O'Neill or maybe a Harrison Bader, like somebody in that category. If you're talking about infielders, like when we'll get to like the Mookie Betts shortstop thing, but of infielders right now, like maybe a Willie Adames could become available if the Brewers fall off. Maybe
he's playing so well. There's no way they're going to trade him. He's their best player.
Yeah, well, he's in a contract year, and if they're out of the playoff race, then maybe like they did with Corbin Burns. But it does get to the point, right, where it's either a kind of underwhelming group, and then some of the guys that you're maybe hoping you could try to go get, like probably either aren't going to be moved or going to be too expensive. And that's where, to your point, Bill, like, yeah, I think the Dodgers probably feel like they should do something. But there's been a lot of seasons where they probably should have done more at the deadline or in an off season or whatever and decided not to. Didn't feel like it was worth the price of prospects or whatever else that they were going to have to pay. And I wonder whether this offseason, whether getting Ohtani and Yamamoto and Glasnow and setting up the team like you do right now, does it add to that sense of urgency? Does it change the calculus in the front office as they evaluate their roster and look at making moves and try to plot out what they're going to do with the trade deadline? I'm not convinced it will. Part of that is just because, again, we have 10 years of history with this front office where, yeah, there have been deadlines they've made big moves, and there have been deadlines where they haven't. And I don't know if the market this year is going to line up for that, which, again, kind of gets to the bigger point of being like, how do you fix this if you're the Dodgers? There's not a very obvious fix to me. Like, sure, maybe you could go get a Tommy Pham, and he helped the Diamondbacks beat the Dodgers last year and get to a World Series. But like, those guys also aren't guarantees either, which makes, some of the struggles they've had the last couple of weeks to me feel like a more of a bigger picture issue, because it's going to be tough, I think, to rectify, short of your top 4 guys all clicking at the same time.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing, right? If you're adding, right, and frankly, like these would be like kind of fairly luxurious additions, I think, right? It's you're getting a hitter the caliber of the Muncy, the Teoscar Hernandez, and kind of to your point though, is like they're not really guarantees, right? I mean, I'm trying to think of the last impact bat they got at the deadline. Was it like Machado? I'm almost kind of thinking, right? I mean, the pitching's kind of, I would say, trending in a positive direction, I think, you know. Maybe you kind of solidify the bullpen, right? But then you're counting on even the starting pitching, right? I mean, you're counting at the end of the day, you're going to be counting on a bunch of guys that have like pretty significant injury histories, and right, things could be looking great through August, and then all of a sudden you end up kind of rolling out 3 guys kind of the way they did last year, and it just
Or
all
2
goes
years
kaput.
ago,
So
sure.
yeah.
Well, I think they owe Shohei. They promised Shohei they wouldn't be the Angels. They promised him they would make the championship run. And I know they're paying him a lot of money, but his fans are their fans. And he came here to win a championship. And for them to not do anything, I think it would be a slap in his face.
Well, this is already 1,000 times better than the Angels,
Well,
I mean, the fact that like he's in what at the end of May and he still has hope,
who's the last team to win a full season championship? The Angels, not the Dodgers. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's a type on both teams, I guess. But like, yeah, but I mean, this is no time the Angels. He just look, man. He seems way happier. Despite having had $16 million stolen from him.
Yeah.
I think it says a lot about the difference in the situation. The fact that he doesn't even talk, right? He's always going out of his way to be respectful of Anaheim. To me, is kind of indicative of just like how hopeless that situation was. I think the fact that again, feel he has to shoulder the entire load. We're seeing that kind of come out in different ways. He just seems a little more. He seems a lot more smiley. I think he's been more open with the media.
He's already been fulfilled. He's already happy. He's good.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to play in October this year, and I think, and this is the thing too, I think that guys of that caliber, right, whatever the sport is, they're going to look at it like, right, if let's just say they get knocked out, whatever, it's going to be, unless it turns into just an absolute, nightmare type situation where they just get swept in the first round, they have like no pitching, whatever. Short of something like that, I think a guy like that is going to look at himself and like, what didn't I do? Right, I didn't hit 600 and hit 50 home runs in in a 5-game series, whatever. I think that's more kind of the way he'll look at that. So yeah, I think now again, I still do think, I mean, to your point though, I do think they are kind of like pot committed, right? They put on so much money into this thing, kind of falling short of at least an LCS, I think, would be a huge failure, and right now to me, I mean, if I'm looking at kind of I think kind of their assets, right? I mean, we, a couple years ago, even there was kind of talk about this like rotation in like AA, and you're kind of like, well, where are these guys?
They're all hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure, however much they're talking about their farm system, this track record's not great, and I kind of wonder if a lot of this, obviously like, with those Baseball America rankings are kind of a lot of like, kind of behind the scene politics involved and stuff like that. I do kind of wonder if that farm system, if they have the capital to kind of go out and, address like multiple things. And if you're kind of boxed into only addressing, kind of focusing on one area, to me, almost at this point, it almost has to be the bullpen, which would be kind of the least sexy of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think the bullpen is the spot where my guess is they look at it like we're going to get Ryan Brazier back at some point. We're going to get Evan Phillips back here soon. We might get Bruce Gratterall back in the second
And
half.
Blake Trinan is great. Blake Trinan is great.
Treinen's been doing well. Daniel Hudson's come back and been doing well. Maybe
Huddy.
our, borderline starters in the postseason can move down there. Maybe Dustin May goes back to the bullpen when he returns. Like, I think when it comes to like the ways to reinforce this team, it falls in two areas, right? And it's either trying to solidify the offense in a way where if Shohei and Mookie and Freddie are struggling in the postseason, you have some other guys that can make something happen, or it's solidifying the rotation and trying to protect against, if Tyler Glasnow gets hurt late in the year, or if Yoshinobu Yamamoto ends up struggling the closer we get to the playoffs as teams, kind of figure him out a little bit. If Walker Buehler remains inconsistent, his return from TJ, like I kind of look at those as the two areas where, to your guys' point, if you're going to make a big splash, that's probably where it needs to happen. And that's why, again, to keep things in perspective, like the Dodgers have a pretty big division lead. On the whole, they're playing pretty well this year. But the reason why these stretches like these last couple weeks, or like the 12-11 start to the season, the reason these things matter so much is because those are the kind of like small sample size periods that you have to avoid when you get to October this year. And the fact that you've already had two of them pop up in the first 2 months, with all the money you spent this offseason, with all the players you went out and got, over the winter, it leaves them in the spot where I think, again, leading up to the deadline, they're going to maybe have to feel like what you were saying, Dylan. Do we have to give up a lot more prospects to go get another impact player or another impact pitcher, or can we kind of piecemeal this together to get like a Joey Gallo-esque kind of addition at the deadline, or like a Kike Hernandez-esque addition like they did last year? I think coming into the year, I probably would have felt like, yeah, that's going to be the spot they're going to be in at the deadline, where you just need to make a few small moves. Now I'm starting to wonder if they do need to make a bigger move, if they do need to get aggressive, and if the opportunity to do that is even going to be there, which some of that will become clear over the next couple months. But I think what's clear right now is, for everything they did in the winter, there are some flaws on this team that have been exposed over semi-extended periods in a way that is really hard to not think back to the last couple Octobers and how they struggled. I think the other piece that ties into this is Mookie Betts and the shortstop position. And if that's something you're going to wedge yourself to for the rest of the year, or if you are going to look at either getting a new shortstop there or moving him to second base full time and kind of piecemealing the shortstop position together with the guys on the roster. So like, what have you guys made of this, of the first 2 months? I think his defense has gotten better. It's probably somewhere average to above average. He got off to a great start offensively. He's cooled off a little bit over the last month. Nobody's really saying that it's because of the workload and all the time he's putting in pregame to learn the position. But I think the longer he goes on not being a top level player, the bigger of a question that becomes. So as you kind of look at these dynamics and how this has shaped up so far, are you still in favor of him playing there? Do you think that that is a situation that can work for this team? Or do you have questions about how this is going to look long-term the rest of the year?
The ball will find him in October. The ball will find him in a big moment. And he struggled in some big moments. It's too much to ask of him. It's been hurting his offense lately. Move him back.
Back to where?
Second base.
I think the mistake was letting this happen in the first place.
Of course.
I'm getting, and this is kind of my problem with this situation now, is I'm wondering if they might be too far down the road now, right, where actually moving him at this point. I mean, just kind of listening to him the last couple of years, it just kind of sounds like he's wanted like certainty of like, what am I going to do? What's going to be my role here? And, he's certainly kind of, he's invested a lot into this emotionally, and we see it every day at the field, right? I mean, he has now become, right, for the last, I don't know, however many years, 15 years, whatever, right? Clayton Kershaw has kind of been the symbol of like work, right? You show up to, especially the time that we show up at the ballpark, we would always see Kershaw running. Now it's like you see Mookie Betts, before games, just getting like a real workout at shortstop. I'm not sure, again, I mean, he was a historically good right fielder, now whether that kind of, right, maybe he wasn't as engaged, whatever, out there. I mean, obviously that was kind of this issue, but man, like once you kind of put him there, I think they're kind of getting closer to that point. I don't think the team seems to think that, right? And maybe if it's the right player, right? That you can find that shortstop. I think that's kind of one thing. But I'm not so sure here. I think we're kind of I think we're kind of getting closer to that point of no return now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the mistake was waiting as long or as close to the start of the season as they did to do this, because that's where some of the tension here is, right? Had you given Mookie Betts from the start of the offseason, told him, hey, you're going to be the shortstop next year, and given him the 2 or 3 months over the winter to get the fundamentals down, to get the basics, to get the instincts, to taking reps there every day over the offseason, I think this is a different calculus. The problem is that they waited until 2 weeks before they went to Korea to make the switch. They gave him virtually no time before the start of the regular season to really get comfortable there. And while he has gotten comfortable over the last couple months, the reason he's gotten comfortable is because he takes ground balls before batting practice. He takes ground balls after batting practice. Sometimes he's taking ground balls during batting practice. And I think the concern that some people are going to start quietly having on the team is, hey, he can't be putting his body through that extensive of pregame work every day and be playing the position during games and be, getting back to our earlier conversation, the kind of hitter we need him to be, especially when you get to the end of the year. Dave Roberts touched on this a little bit today. In his estimation, he thinks within the next month or two, Mookie will start ramping down a little bit with the pregame work. Will start feeling confident enough in his glove, in his abilities at that position to not need to do all of that before games. But right now, it's like every time he misplays a ball, he's spending the next 3 days out there drilling that kind of ball. Like he let one in San Francisco get by him a couple of weeks ago where he dove for it. For the next 3 days, he was like diving after ground balls on the infield, like a dozen times before games, which is just not something you see players typically do, and not something a lot of players are going to be able to physically handle over the course of the year. I do think it's probably too far down the road now to tell him, hey, you're going to go back to playing second base full time, unless you're able to go out and get like a true upgrade at the shortstop position, right? Like a Willy Adames. But, like what are the other shortstops out there? Like Luis Rengifo, maybe that caliber player. You're not telling Mookie Betts he's moving back to second base for some like mediocre but slightly better defensively glove there. The challenge.
But they moved him to shortstop for some slightly better defensive glove in Gavin Lux.
Like to me, the way that their defense is shaped up with this alignment versus how it probably would have looked otherwise with Lux at short and Mookie at second, like I think that the defense has actually been as good in this situation as the Dodgers probably could have hoped for. The problem is that if you want to change now, if you feel like there's ways that you can maybe be better at shortstop or maximize Mookie in a different way, he's already put in all this time now. And it's, I think, a difficult conversation to have, and B, probably not one that Mookie, who wants to play this position, who I think is getting a lot out of getting better at this position, deserves to have it taken away from him at this point. Again, unless you have a clear upgrade. So to me, this is like the needle the Dodgers have to thread the rest of the year with this, is making sure that he's continuing to improve there, while also making sure he's not running himself down, while also making sure his bat stays hot. Not a lot of players can handle all that. I think if there is one guy who can do it, it is Mookie Betts, but this makes this nonetheless a risk. And again, one that the way it's played out, the results have been fine to this point, but the process of it, I think, adds some tension again to how this is going to look over the second half of the season when we get there.
I bet he probably would be quietly relieved to move back.
I think, see, that's the thing too. Like, I think we're looking at this thinking like if he's adequate, it's a win. I bet you this guy's thinking like I'm going to win. Maybe not this year, but I'm going to win a Gold Glove there, right? I mean, that's the way these
Absolutely.
guys think. That's what makes them great, And now going back to kind of the realistic expectations of this, though, they won a World Series. I mean, granted, a short season one, whatever, but like right, and for like a while, like they had Corey Seager as their shortstop. I mean, let's not sit here and pretend, that Corey Seager was Ozzie Smith, because he wasn't, right? I mean, and then I think that's basically where you kind of have to get this to, right? Where he can catch what's hit to him, make the throws that he has to make, right? I mean, look, and Max Muncy, right, before he went down, was actually kind of
he was doing well over there.
He was doing well. That's the thing, right? Yeah, and so that's kind of
Dylan could have never dreamed it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this. It's like, well, if Max Muncy can make himself defensively adequate, maybe Mookie Betts can too. And I just think there's kind of
I think he has been like adequate. He has been adequate.
Well, but I think adequate now is different than adequate in October because, like Plasky said, I think the ball is going to find him.
It always
And
does.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's like just kind of making sure that that ball doesn't turn into like some kind of bomb that just like detonates and right blows up an inning and maybe a series. That's what that's where you basically have to get him to is so that doesn't happen. I got a couple questions for you, Jack. I mean, you've been watching these guys every day, and Plash, I'm sure you have opinions too. Because I think even right with some of the givens, they're questions, right? I think coming into this year, we were looking at Freddie Freeman is still kind of part of the big three. I think he had a big game, obviously, yesterday. Do we think he's still that guy? And then Yamamoto, I think, is kind of right where, I mean, he's in the process of discovering, right, what works here, what doesn't. We're kind of gradually learning about him. Because I mean, I don't know. A couple weeks ago, if you had asked me, I probably would have said you're a game 2 starter. Send Gavin Stone out there at this point, right? Not right, not that right. I mean, I think part of that was how well Stone was pitching, but obviously they gave Yamamoto all that money to be a game 2 starter. So I think where are you with both Freeman and with Yamamoto?
I think Freeman is enough for that guy still. Like he might not be an MVP. He's not going to be an MVP candidate this year, at least not right now. But the Dodgers don't. It's not like binary either. He's like one of the best hitters in baseball, or he's not as good as the team needs him to be. I think there's some regression here. He's been working through some things with his swing and just how he's kind of feeling overall physically that Dylan wrote about a couple weeks ago. That I trust him enough as a hitter that he's probably still going to get to October with pretty good numbers, and you're going to feel pretty good about him. Yamamoto, to me, is the bigger question, and kind of like what I was talking about the rotation earlier, is to get to a World Series, you almost always have to have at least 2 guys that are going 6, 7 innings in playoff games, at least 5 really good innings in a playoff game. And there's been times that Yamamoto's looked that good, right? There's been times where he hasn't. I think the fastball, it's pretty clear right now, needs to be commanded really, really well. Otherwise, it's a liability. Like big league hitters, if he leaves it over the plate, are going to get on it. I think figuring out the rest of his arsenal is another part. Is it you're going to try to attack guys with curveballs early in count? Are you putting them away with sliders, which he hasn't thrown that much of? The splitter has been better, but still a little bit more inconsistent than probably anybody was expecting it was going to be when he came over here. And yeah, like if you said that tomorrow he's got to go be your game 2 starter in a division series, I'm not certain that you'd feel that much better about him than whoever the game 2 starter on the other side might be. And this has been of the many issues that have hurt the Dodgers the last couple Octobers. This has been one of them, that they haven't had that level of dominant starting pitching. So that's probably the one, like the guy that I think the outcomes this year, we just don't know, right? Like the variance of where he could end up, the kind of numbers he could have, the kind of season he could put together. I think there's a pretty wide range, but the Dodgers really need him to be close to like an ace caliber kind of guy, because again, after him and Glasnow, there are a lot of question marks. And yeah, Gavin Stone probably is the pitcher you trust next, which is good for Gavin Stone, who a year ago was getting knocked around in Tampa and sent down to the minors, but probably bad for the Dodgers that he's your 3rd best option at the moment. And that might change when Bobby Miller comes back and Walker Buehler has more time. But because of that, you really need Yamamoto to be like a really, really high level pitcher, which he has been at some times, but to me, at least, has not done it enough for me to feel confident about, that in a postseason environment.
Nola, Wheeler, Rangers, Suarez.
Right.
The Phillies have the pitching.
And I don't think you can say the same thing about the Dodgers right now, even with like Glasnow and Yamamoto. Like even Glasnow to an extent. Like before yesterday, his 2 starts before that weren't great. Like again, this is like a high, like we're grading on a really high curve right now. But that's the situation the Dodgers are in. Everything is about winning October. Everything is through the lens of what's going to work in a postseason series and what won't. And yeah, like you're asking me, is Yamamoto going to be good enough to help them win 100 games in the regular season? Sure, easily. Like I think he's going to be a pretty decent pitcher, but there's a difference between being a decent pitcher. Lance Lynn was a decent pitcher in the regular season for the Dodgers last year. Lance Lynn was a really bad option to throw out there in a playoff game. And obviously this is a very different situation in terms of talent level, but like, getting through a regular season and shutting down a really talented lineup in the playoffs are 2 different things. And I think Glasnow, when he's been good, like has shown that, right? Like there's been enough from him that the big question with him is just the health. If you can get him to October, I think you're going to feel really good every time he's on the mound. Yamamoto, he's got a lot of time to get to that point, but he's not there yet. And I think of all the different storylines to follow as a fan the rest of this year, like that's one of the big ones is can he be counted on as that kind of guy? And if not, do the Dodgers have enough other options to help compensate and make sure that the rotation is not going to be something that bites them again?
Down to Kershaw again.
Well, I mean, he might be part of it, right? Like I think if Clayton Kershaw's in your playoff rotation, either he has had the most miraculous return from a shoulder surgery that a 36-year-old ever has, or the Dodgers are in a tough spot. But like that's again where they're at. Like they have one true ace, a bunch of like guys that you feel fine about starting regular season games, and then Yamamoto, who can swing a lot about, sort of the construction and trustworthiness of this team. Again, in a World Series push. Dylan didn't even complain about the name of the show this time. So
I still don't like the name of the show.
I love the name. The Dodger. It's called what's the show called? Dodger Debate.
Dodger Debate. Are we really
Love
debating?
Yeah, we debated. I say move Mookie. You say keep Mookie.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be back again. I mean, we keep thinking that this Dodger season is going to be simple and boring, and instead they're very up and down for a team that spent $1 billion and was supposed to win, 150 games this year. So, for Bill and Dylan, thank you guys for joining, and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.
See ya.